Hello and welcome to IAMPRO's Industry Q&As. I am Ben Brooks. I'm one of the founders of IAMPRO, and tonight we are joined by Matt Mchale, who is a producer on BBC's drama Casualty. Matt has had a long and varied career. He's worked his way up from the very bottom to the very top of the industry ladder, and he's here to share his journey with us. So let me welcome in, Matt. How you doing, mate?
How you doing? You all right? Yeah, good. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. Long time. How are you surviving in the current climate? Everything all right?
Yeah, good. I mean, as you mentioned, I'm on Casualty at the moment, and we got back up and running last August, and we've been going solidly since then. So it's good. It's good to be back up and running, definitely. And it's a different way of working, but we're working, so that's a positive. And I think we're still making some good shows as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. Well, I'm glad that you're busy, and it's we'll get to all the details about how you how it's working during lockdown and that a little bit later in the interview. But we always start with this, Matt. Firstly, I'm going to ask you, what is a producer and what is a typical day for you in Casualty at the moment?
Producer, really, you're sort of a little bit over everything, really. So you kind of cover both the editorial side with the scripts, but also the production side with the kind of the mechanics of getting it done, but also the financial side as well. So the budgets, you're slightly responsible. You sort of overall kind of responsibility for everything to bring it all together, really, and make sure that you're making the best show you can. It's a slightly different job on a show like Casualty because we're going on all the time. I'm in post on one episode, shooting another episode, and prepping a third set of episodes. Whereas if you're producing something that's more of a one-off, then that becomes your exclusive focus for however long the job is. So a typical day for me today was quite typical. We're in studio on the unit that's shooting. So I'm in at 7:30 to make sure everything's okay and everyone's up and running there. And then go and do the line run with the actors, make sure everyone's happy with the words, watch the block, make sure we're all happy, everything's good to go. And then I'll go back to the office, start playing through some emails. Then was dealing with some stuff for post. We've got some ADRs to do on the block we just finished shooting for Christmas. And then dealing with the scripts for the next, which actually the season finale, so that's going to be exciting. Yes, I was dealing with the scripts because my director sat down for that yesterday. So he's coming down to Cardiff tomorrow for some recce's and look at some stunt locations because, of course, it's Casualty, end of season, big stunts. It has to be.
Yeah, is it always sort of high when you're filming Casualty? Is it always sort of high octane ambulance stunts and arms being lobbed off and things like that, or is it a lot more calmer?
It's more calm at the moment for the obvious reason. I mean, one of the things on Casualty, we're very aware we don't want to be doing anything that's going to risk adding pressure to the NHS, which I know is something we've all heard, but we think it's sort of, slightly reckless of us to throw someone off a bridge if we know there's a high probability that they're going to twist an ankle and end up in A&E at a time when A&E is already stretched. So our stunts have definitely come down the way overall. So in fact, the stunt that we're going to be doing in 23-24, which is the next book I'm doing, will involve a lot of sort of camera trickery and CGI and stuff to make it look like it's a really big stunt without actually taking any risks.
Oh, that's good. That's great. And we might as well ask how, now we're on the subject, how things are working during COVID for you. Is there certain protocols that you have to put in place? Does the day-to-day running of the set, is it the same, or how does it work in Casualty?
It's very different. I mean, on Casualty specifically, we're operating a socially distanced set, both in front and behind camera. And we've done that simply because, as you know, shows like Casualty run for 48, 50 weeks of the year. So we can't be asking people to bubble away for their families. If you've got an actor who's one of your main actors, we can't be asking them to bubble away for their family for that length of time. If you're doing a 6-week, 8-week job, it's quite reasonable to go, this is the job, this is the commitment. Does that work for you or not? And obviously it's not practicable on a show like ours. So we've got one-way systems all around the building. You can only go in and out of certain doors now. A lot of rooms that were multiple occupancy have become single occupancy. Working from home, anyone who's also, like, as a producer, when I'm only prepping or only post-production, I work from home. It's only if I'm shooting I actually go in or go to location. And everything's 2 meter distance. Again, we're using some camera trickery, using some basic split screen stuff, some slightly more complex green screen stuff to comp stuff together. But yes, essentially a lot of the time we're doing is just using a lot of moving cameras to try and mask the fact that everyone is 2 meters apart.
Yeah, it's strange at the moment, isn't it? I mean, when I'm on set, it's such a social, usually such a social atmosphere when you're working, in television, and for everyone to be standing and 2 meters distance and trying to work within a studio capacity, especially, everything becomes a lot more difficult. But it's good that we've got our ways and we're getting around it, and things are still going ahead. Matt, I suppose we better ask with you. How did you start off in the industry? How did you first get into television? What was your entry?
Well, I sort of grew up in the industry, for want of a better phrase. My dad has always been in the industry. He's an actor, writer, and director. Who he actually was one of the co-creators of EastEnders. There was Julia and Tony, obviously it was their baby, and then there was my dad and about 5 or 6 other writers who were from the early days and in it quite a lot. My dad was created a lot of the characters you might know, such as Janine Butcher, for argument's sake, was one of his characters.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's all I ever knew, to be honest. That's like my version of a mine, the very middle class version of a mine. It's what I always wanted to do. And then when I left A-level college, I went to film school instead of university, and did a few years there, which I loved. I absolutely loved. And then graduated from film school and was lucky enough to get a job quite early on for a company in script development, which gave me a really nice grounding in the script process before becoming a runner for the BBC. On Casualty, funnily enough, was the first running job I did.
Oh, full circle.
Yeah, a long time ago now, though. Yeah, it was quite a different show then. And then I worked my way up the AD ladder, which, I don't know if you want to talk about that now, if that's something you want to talk about a bit more later.
We'll touch on that in a short while. We'll go through the career path of a runner to a first AD, if that's right. Because Matt worked as a first assistant director for many years. So, we'll get to that part in a second. I just want to ask you a bit more about film school, Matt. We have a lot of questions from students who, are sort of weighing up the options of what to do. Do I go to film school? Is it worth it? Should I try and get a job straight away? What's been your take on the film school process?
I absolutely loved film school, and I learned a heck of a lot there. I learned a lot, and as you do at university, you learn a lot as a person. It's a nice soft way of moving out of your parents' house at that age, to be honest, because you're still kind of in education, but in a lot freer way. I learned a lot about mechanics, and the great thing about film school for me, I know a lot of things about the camera department that I would never know because I've never been in the camera department, but because of the classes I had to take there, and because they make you work in the camera department and the sound department and costume department for all the different. It just gives you a nice overview. But to kind of stick with the theme of honesty, there's the difference is you didn't come out with the big debts that you do now. Therefore, I think it's less of an obvious option than it was when I went. So I'm that old that the government used to pay for you to go to university. And I think that is a consideration now in reality, because students are saddled with an enormous debt. And I know it's not something they have to pay off immediately, but it is still a consideration. Yeah. So I think it's less clear cut than when I made that choice, to be honest. But I think there's an argument for both.
Yeah, it was a positive experience for you, but it's probably not a necessity to have to go if you want a career in TV and can't afford to go to university. There are if you can get a job any other way, then do it. If you can't go to film school.
I mean, there's people who I won't mention by name simply because I haven't asked for them first, but hold very high jobs on big long-running shows in this country who are good friends of mine who never had any formal training, just went in as a runner, loved it, worked hard, learned as they worked, and like I say, and that's on big long-running shows, and they hold very high-ranking jobs that they love, as well. And they're very good at.
Certainly, how I started straight in as a runner. So yeah, I suppose let's move on to the career path. So you started as a runner on Casualty, which is essentially being a dog's body, right? It's where most people start in the TV career if they don't have a specific department that they want to go in, if they want to come and explore what area suits them. So yeah, how did you find being a runner, and yeah, what was the progression after that?
I loved it. I absolutely loved being a runner, and I was a runner for a good few years on a variety of projects, Casualty obviously, but then I did some sort of fairly sort of sizable films, some really good kind of high-end TV, some other soapy sort of serial drama type things, and it was great. But it's a very tiring job. You work very long hours, and you are running. I mean, the clue's in the name. You're running around all day. They're not hiding it from you. There's no misdirection there. I then went and I managed to get a job as a third AD, which is third assistant director, which is the sort of first. I mean, the runner is often part of the AD department, but it's the first time you kind of get the kind of credit or the name assistant director. Yeah. What I loved about a third is you direct the background there. So whenever you see, say, like the Queen Vic, where we've worked together quite a lot, and it's a very busy, kind of exciting environment, and you've got a lot of action that has to make it feel like a busy East End pub. You get to do that as a third, and that's actually, I think, really exciting and very creative, and that's a job I really, really liked. And again, I did that on a variety of different shows.
Yeah, so a third AD, you direct the background, like you say. So when you guys are seeing all the people, wandering around in the background, a third AD is directing them. What other roles does a third AD have on set?
I mean, information is one of the key roles of the assistant director department, is to make sure that every department knows what's going on. So often the first and the director and the producer will make a decision. The first will let the second and the third know, and then it's up to the third, because they're on the floor to actually make sure the heads of department on the floor know scene order changes, change the time of lunch. It can be anything, any bit of information, so people know what we're doing next. Liaising with the actors, getting the actors to set, so you're dealing with the actors a lot, which is, that's something, because everyone's different, so you have to deal with everyone different. So that's its own skill as well, to be able to kind of help bring 7 different people with 7 different requirements to set and make sure they're all happy when they get there. It's its own skill as well.
Yeah.
And then just, there's an element of running to it as well, just being there if people need you, if truth be told.
Okay. And then after third AD, you become a second AD after a couple of years of working as a third, I suppose, and enough experience, which is a slightly different role. It's not on set, is it?
No, you're offset, and you're in charge of the call sheets, which I'm sure most of the people watching are aware of. The call sheets, the document that goes out every day that lists what the unit are going to be shooting the next day, the hours, the scenes, who's in, what time they're required, any special equipment that's hired in for the day that's over and above the normal. So the second AD creates that every day in conjunction with the first. They will liaise a lot with the actors. So the actors who go through costume and makeup know what's happening. They help shepherd everyone around and make sure everyone's in the right place at the right time. But yeah, it's much more of an administrative role than running or thirding is. But you learn a whole load of new skills, and you learn to read the schedule. I mean, everyone can read the schedule by that point, but you learn to really read the schedule. You learn to reschedule if things are going wrong, or weather cover, things like that.
Is it? Do you think it's important? We'll get on to the first AD in a second, Matt. But do you think it's important that people don't just jump in from a runner to a second AD? Do you think it's important that they have to work through each role to climb the ladder?
I think so. I mean, depending on who you are and what your skill and your sort of passion is, really, I don't think you necessarily have to spend as long in every role. I spent a lot less time as a second than I did as a third, a runner, or certainly as a first. Because it wasn't a job that I massively loved, to be truthful. I like being on set. It's an environment I like, and I felt quite removed from it as a second. There are people I know who love seconding. Someone I know recently was given the chance to first, and they did really, really well, and they said, I prefer seconding, I'd like to go back to it. So it's a horses for courses thing. So yeah, personally, I spent less time seconding than some people would, and that was because I didn't enjoy it, so I kind of pushed to have the opportunity to first.
But enough time to probably understand the role and then as a first, you have a bit of a better idea of what's going on behind the scenes when you eventually get to first.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise skipping it entirely, but don't feel you have to do 4 strict years in every single thing before you can move on. It depends. Yeah.
Okay. And then let's talk about a first AD, a first assistant director. What do they do? What's their job? And
well, you're the sort of focus of the floor to some degree. 'Cause you're the voice. Obviously, I've been asked this before, and I think the easiest way to say it is like you're almost like the foreman, because you're the gobby one who shouts and tells everyone what's happening. You don't come up with a lot of it, funnily enough. You're more disseminating information, but what you are doing is prioritize it. So each department will tell you what they need, and then it's up to you to prioritize the order we do things. You'll help the director, and the director will say, these are the 6 shots I need. You'll help them come up with the quickest way of achieving those 6 shots. This is all on the floor, obviously. I mean, and at the moment, during the COVID protocols, that's even stricter because of restricted numbers on set. It's the first who has to kind of say, right, we need all these people off so the art department can work, right? We need all these people off so the sparks can work, because you can't really have 2 departments working at the same time, which I'm sure you've seen and witnessed during this sort of time.
yeah,
and that's that on the floor, and you get to do a lot of fun stuff as well, because you're in charge of the stunts. Obviously not doing them, but you're kind of calling the stunts, making sure everything's safe. Occasionally you get to stand in the middle of the road and say, make it rain, and it's rained magically around you. There is a lot of fun stuff to being a first.
yeah.
But also in prep, you're in charge of the schedule. So you break down the script, which is where you go through each scene in the script, and you work out what the individual components required. So that's like actors, any props, the set, and you list it into the schedule so that people can at a glance see what their department needs to bring at that point to achieve that scene.
So this is all before you.
This is all before, yeah. So I mean, often, so at the moment on Casualty, you get 4 weeks to shoot 4 weeks, 4 weeks prep to shoot for 4 weeks. Right. So you get exactly the same amount of time to actually prep it as you do to actually film it, and that shows you how involved all that is. Because you're sort of second in line for health and safety as well. So you've got to have a really good understanding of the health and safety process, and to keep a unit safe, because you have got 50 plus people with a lot of moving parts, wires, cables, often wet, cold, hot, dark, bright. All these different conditions that you wouldn't necessarily have people moving around in. And you're in charge of that safety, and then you factor in things like stunts and cars and horses and things like that. So, yeah, it does take a lot of planning to make sure you're on top of everything.
It's a big job with a lot of responsibility. But
it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it is a big job with a lot of responsibility, in all honesty. But it's a heck of a lot of fun. It really is.
If it's prepped right, you can a lot of the weight gets off your shoulders, and you can enjoy the shoot. Thanks. That's a really good insight into what a first AD does. I suppose the next question, Matt, I'd have is, after first AD, I mean, you've obviously become a producer. I know a lot of people who take the AD route, the assistant director route, to become a director. That's the producer and director roles are kind of a natural progression from if you want to be a producer or director, they're the good ways to get to those roles, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably more common for a first to become either a production manager or a director, but there are quite a lot of firsts who go on to produce. And for me personally, I just felt what I enjoy lies more in producing than it does in directing or production managing. So I sort of worked towards that. But a lot of ADs can become directors, definitely.
Yeah, well, you budding directors, that's a good route for you to get out there.
And you learn so much just because you spend, particularly once you're a first, a third to some degree, but especially as a first, you spend 10, 12 hours a day stood next to a director. And if you're working on a show like EastEnders, every 2 weeks you're working with another director. So you learn, if you want to see what other directors do, both the good and the bad, you learn just so much from being an assistant director.
Yeah, it's a great role to oversee everything that goes on set, and like I did, I found my passion. I found my way. I started as a runner in the third, and then went into sound. That's usually people start as runners and then find their feet and decide which path they want to go down, which is a great route. Okay, so say somebody manages to get themselves, they've wangled themselves a job as a runner, they've never done it before, it's their first day. What are your top tips for these people on their first day? What should they do to sort of impress, if you like?
Make sure you're on time, if not early, to start with. First rule of the whole industry is don't be late. I think it's silly things, but you see it's not a fashion parade. That doesn't mean you should come looking scruffy, but wear clothes that are appropriate for spending 10, 12 hours on your feet running around. Don't try and look like you're about to go for a night out. Work out who you're reporting to, because different teams, as a runner, some teams will want you to report directly to the second, others will want you to report directly to the third, and just make sure that you'll know what that person does. Radio etiquette's a really big thing as a runner. A lot of new runners don't know how to use the radio, and it's not just the mechanics of actually pressing the button, but it's about there's a language to the radio, so you can speak to the third and see what sort of things they like to say. Silly little things like, which I know Ben will remember from his time, but when somebody needs to go to the toilet, you don't say so-and-so stepped off to go to the toilet. You say they've gone 10-1. Just what happens, really. Not quite sure why. I've never really worked out why, but it's what you say.
It's an old lorry driver's code thing, I think. I can't remember exactly, but I did look it up once. But yeah, there's some meaning behind it. But yeah,
historical kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't sort of hang around on the radio gassing, because most radios, I mean, some shows have slightly more advanced systems, but most radios are one way. So if you're talking, somebody else can't reply to you. So it's about being quick, stopping talking, and making it clear you've stopped talking as well, so that people aren't waiting for the rest of the information. And just being keen, really, and just being present. It's very tiring, and particularly if it's the first time you've done it. It's very often the first time you'll have spent that long on your feet, running around, taking in a lot of new information. So it's very tiring, but just power through it, really, because you can sleep that evening and go back the next day, and you build up a stamina quick enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of etiquette and things that that you should learn. And I'd probably listening is your best bet, right? On your first day, listen, suss it all out, work it all out, and see who speaks when and what they do. And it's a real listener's game to start with, I think, running. But like
really good advice. Yeah, really good advice. Yeah, just soak it up.
Find out what tea the director likes or coffee on the first. And that's great. Yeah, so perfect. What would you say, Matt, if somebody doesn't have the opportunity to go to film school and they've written 1,000 letters and emails to production companies? Is there any way that people can try and get in? Should they make their own stuff? What should they do you think, to try and get a headway in the industry?
I mean, making your own stuff, particularly if you want to go into sort of directing and stuff, the great thing now is, which we didn't really have when I was younger, the accessibility. Edit suites, to even get a kind of a clunky old edit suite, was a very expensive thing, whereas now, of course, most of us have got a half decent edit suite on our phones, if not our phones, definitely on our laptops. And our phones are at least half digital cameras as well. So you can make kind of quite fun stuff. If you are making your own stuff, my advice would be always remember that they're called short films, and never get carried away. Tell a short story in a short time, rather than try and tell a very big story in a short time, because that's when it kind of gets confusing. As far as if you wanted to be going to running, unfortunately, the slightly frustrating thing is to just keep ringing, keep emailing people. You'll normally find somebody will take a bite at some point, and a lot of that is luck. I mean, the person I used as a third AD for the last couple of years that I was a first was I was doing a lecture about ADing, and I offered my email at the end, and said, look, if anybody, when you guys finish the course, if anybody wants to email me, I don't know what I'll be doing, but if there's anything I can do to help, I'll always try. And she literally emailed me at the point that my runner had just dropped out on me on a job that I started on Monday. And I went, well, can you start the job on Monday? She went, yeah, great. Now, had she emailed 3 days earlier or 3 days later, that might not have happened.
Yeah.
So the harsh reality is there's an element of luck.
Yeah.
About right place, right time.
But if you don't,
but just keep plugging away.
Yeah, if you don't keep hammering away, you don't. You'll miss those opportunities. So
yeah.
Do you think just keep trying, keep persevering, keep calling, keep emailing, and eventually, hopefully, someone will bring you in.
And shows like EastEnders, Casualty, Coronation Street, Emmerdale, if you're up that way, those shows, Holby, because they've got 2 units or more running all the time, they have such a high staff demand compared to a lot of other shows that they're often really good places to start, because they'll always, at some point, they'll always need someone, because somebody will be moving on, somebody will be ill, and a lot of people. I mean, one of the people I was talking about earlier, who's now got a really good job, was actually building at the studios at the Bill, was doing kind of hod carrying, basically. He wasn't a builder, he was just literally doing day labour. One of the runners didn't turn up, and someone said, do you want to do a day's running? Because we need someone to do it. And he's now running quite a big show. I mean,
wow.
it did take nearly 25 years to get from that point, but there is unfortunately an element of luck and time and a place, which you can't legislate for, unfortunately.
But you can. We live in a wonderful era of information being at our fingertips. There are some things that you could probably do. I'll give you some advice. Is that you could probably do to give yourself more of a chance. Is you can look up production managers on television series these days. You can find out who the first AD is if you do enough research. You can look into these things and target your emails at these people. Try and find out what productions are coming up, and look at the line producers and the production managers, and send them an email. That's
well, without giving too much away. It's amazing when you look down the credits of any given show, how many people will just be their name at theproductioncompany.co.uk.
Yeah.
And you will reach people like that, and people. The great thing is, it's a big industry that's getting bigger, so we always need people. So it's not. Some people try and paint it as a closed shop, and actually, everybody always wants new people and wants new ideas as well. So it's definitely keep plugging away.
And it's certainly growing as well. There's all these new Amazon, Apple, all these new
Netflix,
big companies coming in the game.
Netflix and Lucasfilms have got big bases down near us, and they're doing a lot. Like Sex Ed is done just a few miles from here. I can't remember what it is Lucasfilm are doing, but Netflix are doing Extinction, and the one down here as well. So there's so much going on. Yeah. That's the other thing. I mean, I grew up in and around London, and I love London, but it's not a London-centric industry anymore. There's a lot going on in Bristol. There's a lot going on in Cardiff. There's a lot going on in Manchester. A lot going on in Leeds, and then of course up to like Glasgow and Edinburgh as well, or Belfast. I mean, kids' TV in Belfast is enormous. So if you're prepared to move around, that's the other thing, because there's definitely there's a larger talent base in London than there is in a lot of the other places. So that's the other thing. If you're prepared to kind of go to one of those other places, there tends to be a few more gaps for people who don't know who to fill them. Another
thing that comes to my head, just a little tip, would be it's always good to have, if you're in a position to get your driver's license. There's sometimes some driving involved with being a runner. So having a driver's license is sometimes seen as a plus if you're employing someone to be a runner. So that's another little tip. Matt, gun to head, producing or first ADing, what's your preference?
I'm producing. I mean, I love first ADing, and I wouldn't say I'd never do it again. It depends which way the wind blows, whatever. But what I love about producing is the script involved, and the fact that I'm kind of. So like today, for example, we were literally storylining the end of the series, and then I'll get to that all the way through to post-production, and get to sign off on the whole thing. So that I love, because it is kind of totally overarching. Whereas the first, you are very much looking at the one aspect, which is the shoot.
Yeah, you feel much more part of the overall journey of the
Yeah.
you're delivering when you're producing. That's great. That's really cool. What are the best bits about working in television and the worst bits?
I mean, the worst bits are fairly self-evident after a couple of days, which are the hours. We do work long hours as a general rule. You're often in the cold and the wet. I mean, if you work in England, there tends to be about 2 months a year, roughly in the middle of kind of like each season, where the weather's actually about right to work in the season. Otherwise, it tends to be too hot or too cold. So that's the sort of downside of it. But the upside of it is, I think it's a really fulfilling job. It makes one of the ways I often describe it is, I want to get out of bed every day and I want to go to work. You know, and I'm not a young man anymore, but I still want to get out of bed. I still want to go to work. I've got friends who earn a lot more money than I do, but they hate their jobs. And you go, well, you know, where's the payoff there? I actually enjoy it. It's a lot of fun when you're there. And when you make a good episode of something, it's a really great feeling. And that's not just as in this role, that's in any role. As a runner, when you see something go that you've done your bit on, and that's a really great episode or a really great film, then you're really proud of that. Or I know I am, and you know, most people are. And whatever your role in it, even if it's not self-evident to the people who watch it, who don't understand how the industry works, you know what you did in it. And that show wouldn't have happened without you, because at the end of the day, every job ultimately is as important as the others. While I know there is a hierarchy there, just so the system runs, if you take any of those pieces out, the whole system falls apart. It is a machine of parts. It's not. So and you get to see stuff that people wouldn't see normally. I mean, silly things like locations. I was filming in Wembley Stadium not that long ago. Got to walk out on the pitch at Wembley Stadium. How can I not remember the name of Wembley? How long have I been in Wales that I've forgotten the name of Wembley? But you know, we went to the home dressing room, the away dressing room, just saw stuff that you just don't get to see as a person who goes to watch the football there. All sorts of locations. And again, Ben, you'll have done the same. Get to some quite wacky places. I think you and I did the one together where they had the model for the Dam Busters. Were you there?
Yeah. PRE, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah.
That's it, yeah. Where they literally designed the whole Dam Busters thing. You've got the model and you can see it, and you just, that's not things that people get to see. So there's a lot of fun to it. You work with a lot of great people as well.
Yeah.
And your after dinner stories tend to be better than anybody else's.
Yeah. Okay, Matt. And finally, my one final question to you is, what advice would you give to your younger self just about to embark on your career in television? Would you have done anything differently, or would you pass on any advice to yourself now?
I think things
You're not perfect, mate. Let's not.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to think what. It's where to start rather than fighting on. It's where to start with the list.
The list, yeah.
I think the key thing is with anything is sometimes just make sure you're brave in your choices. It's very easy to play it safe, and there have been times definitely where I've maybe stayed in a job or a role for longer than maybe I should have done. I haven't capitalized, and that's more to do with, you go, okay, well, I'm getting a safe wage, and that's fine. And you look back and go, well, other people who made this kind of scary / brave choice, it worked out for it probably would have done for me. And that's fine. You know, I'm where I want to be, and it's great. So I don't have any massive regrets in that respect. But I think, yeah, that would be a key thing. Don't let the kind of sort of fear stagnate your career, I guess.
Brilliant. That's awesome. Thanks for that, Matt. It's been really lovely catching up with you and talking to you. And yeah, I hope the rest of your casualty block goes well, and hopefully I get to work with you soon. Yeah,
it'd be great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for asking me.
Cheers, Matt. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye, mate.
Thanks, bye.
Hello. Thanks.